Violence is unavoidable in all aspects of life. Although there is no single definition of violence, it can be understood as a destructive force that can be categorized as either direct or structural. This video highlights that the interconnection of violence against immigrants is reproduced at national borders and in migrant camps. Furthermore, I'll be focusing on the geographical dimensions of violence, illustrated in this image of a young girl sitting amongst debris in the Calais migrant camp. I aim to emphasize how violence is influenced and shaped by structural processes on a local and global scale. I will be drawing on the literature from Dempsey, Mendes, and Davies, Ayeski, and Desi to stress the violent geographies of migration, and to highlight the persistent inequalities and structural violence that can occur in the Calais migrant camp and other such facilities. The Calais migrant camp is a product of structural and infrastructural violence. Structural violence refers to those left to suffer in agonizing circumstances that are normalized through the law. Infrastructural violence refers to the unequal access to services. These forms of violence are representative of the residents of Calais, who have been denied essential amenities by that state, which is considered a violation of human rights. By this definition, migrant camps are excluded and neglected groups that are forced to accept unsafe and violent environments. This picture was taken in the unofficial Calais camp in northern France and was published in the Guardian newspaper. It depicts an example of how violence is manifested in spaces like camps and borders. The camp was previously known as the Calais Jungle and was formed near the English Channel by those attempting to cross towards England. Dempsey discusses the history of the Calais camp in France. He explains that France has hosted around 368,000 refugees, but both the French government and the EU neglected responsibility and instead focused on debates of the political and economic implications of immigrants. The issue became popular in the media and was labelled a refugee crisis. Following the growing size of the camp, the government chose to shut it down in 2016 and claimed they'd try to relocate the migrants in other areas of France, although hundreds of immigrants still remain in Calais, living in hazardous spaces with no government support. Care for Calais is the charity organisation behind this image. They are the last non-profit organisation working in the camp, as other organisations departed because of the risk caused by the spread of COVID-19. This image is very powerful, as it invokes feelings of pain, suffering, and neglect. It physically shows the inhumane living conditions of the Calais migrant camp. It invokes questions around what sort of violence these people have escaped from, and the effects of structural violence has on young children. Refugee camps are violent spaces of inaction. Davies, Ayeski, and Desi focus on the biopolitics of migration. This includes the role of the state in neglecting refugees in a formal capacity, which led to thousands sharing unsafe spaces. The authors explain the consequences of state inaction and argue the Calais camp is an example of political failure. Structural violence also occurs from the state via restricting access to basic services and the welfare system. For her article, Mendes interviewed various members of the aid organisation helping the camp, where they discussed the appalling sanitation conditions and increased police violence. In the article, Mendes states, "She said those in the camps have to make do with pitiful washing facilities, with only 2 taps available for up to 700 people in one of the main sites. We went to one of the smaller sites, and their water comes in a barrel in the morning," she said. "They said it had been there for an hour before the police came and kicked it over." The picture is a demonstration of structural violence that highlights the increased suffering of displaced migrants. Since the destruction of the jungle, the Calais camp has seen inhumane conditions as a result of failed state policies. The existing geopolitical system has created uneven spatial distributions that reduce immigrants' access to legal aid for applying for refugee status and basic human services. To conclude, this image is a powerful reminder of the complicated geopolitics of migration and the reality of political neglect and abandonment